Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Microsoft Surface Pro 4. Now this is the 4th gen Surface Pro, as I just mentioned, and it really has been proved in very subtle ways. But trust me, those subtle ways are still important, and that's because, after all, by at least the 4th generation, things should be getting pretty mature, and they have here. In fact, this is easily the best tablet-based PC, as long as you accept that it's an ultra-low voltage processor under the hood, that money can buy. And I can say that without any hesitation. Now, the model I've been working with is the i5, priced at $1299. That is an Intel Skylake, again, ultra-low voltage processor, complemented by 256 gigs of internal storage. You've also got 8 gigs of RAM, Intel integrated 520 GPU, no Iris graphics here. And then you also have a micro SD card slot for additional storage right there, which gets tucked away as it has with every generation. But the design is really straight out of the 3rd gen. And we also have a new type cover, which I'm going to be sharing my experience on today as well. And the kickstand, still the same, takes you basically to any angle you could possibly desire. The type cover, as I mentioned, has been revamped. And that's also a significant update, in my opinion. Let me go ahead and power the machine on. And basically what you're looking at here is physically just about the exact same form factor as the Surface Pro 3. The key difference is we now have a slightly larger display, 12.3 inches, as opposed to the 12-inch display. Basically, Microsoft just eliminated some of the bezel, made the bezel thinner, got rid of the Windows button. And when it comes to operationally speaking, everything is pretty much the same. They worked on cooling. Battery life did not improve. So for those of you that were hoping that this was the generation where you were going to see 10, 12 hours, not happening. You're looking at 6 to 7, and that's a reasonable estimate. Now, when you look at the display, it looks pretty similar to the previous gen. I would say a little bit richer. We do have more pixels here since the display did get slightly larger. It doesn't have the 3000 by 2000 found in the 13.5-inch Surface Book, but still more than 2K, more than it practically needs. I don't know that we needed to really see a bump in resolution, but I'm not going to turn it away. Still a 3:2 aspect ratio on this machine. And in terms of overall performance, the i5 that I have here, as I mentioned before, with the 8 gigs of RAM, is basically what you need if you're going to do, or at least try to push, the Surface Pro line to its capacity, as far as it's at least capable of going. Now, Microsoft does state that if you're going to try to run AutoCAD, that you need to have an i7 model. But interestingly enough, when it comes to the Surface Book, you only need the entry-level i5. Also, interestingly enough, the i5 entry-level shares the exact same integrated GPU and, again, Intel Skylake 6th Gen i5 processor that we have here, and the same 8 gigs of RAM. In fact, it has 128 gigs of SSD storage rather than the 256 we're getting here at $1299. Keep in mind the keyboard is a $130 accessory. If you want a fingerprint scanner, you're looking at an additional, well, it bumps up to $160, I believe. So nothing inexpensive here. This is why in my Surface Book update, I mentioned I wish that the Surface Book bottom half really was the accessory rather than this, and that this was included at this point. I think it would make a lot of sense. Microsoft has definitely made their vig, if you will, on this accessory, the type cover brand. I know that initially it cost a lot of money to create something from scratch, but they've more than paid off that bill now. Clearly, essentially, you can tell from the maturation of the product. I mean, really now you're looking at a fantastic keyboard. The 3rd gen was already great, but now here we've got something that's even better. Larger touchpad, spaced out island style keyboard with more travel. So they just took something that was the best type cover ever and improved upon it, similarly to what they did to the tablet itself. So this isn't incredibly different from the 3rd gen Pro. Again, only a bump up on the screen real estate by 0.3 inches, slight bump up in resolution, better cameras, the same ones you'll find in the Surface Book, 8 on the back, 5 on the front. Windows Hello will recognize your face, unlock the system, so you don't really need a fingerprint scanner, in my opinion. And overall performance here is great. Now, occasionally the type cover will unpair, even though it'll be connected to the machine. The machine won't see it. A reboot rectifies that. I've also run into some popping noises with audio, which I've found on the Surface Book as well, and another Surface Pro 4 that I have in my possession. So I have not seen a single Surface product from this fourth and first gen for the Surface Book that has not had the popping issue. Hopefully that'll be addressed with a driver fix, but based on history, that's unlikely, and it's more likely to be a hardware issue. So we'll see what happens. Can't really give you an official position from me yet, but I'll likely end up swapping them towards the end of the month if things do not get rectified. Again, these are all purchased. These are not samples from Microsoft. So this is the same thing you'd be purchasing walking into the store. That's why I'm giving you a warning in advance. So it's a uniform issue both here for me on the Surface Pro 4 and the Surface Book. But in terms of everything else, speakers are great. Overall performance, I'm not in love with the fact that we've got a single power profile. But again, if you want to have a really powerful tablet, something that is not an ultra low voltage, you're going to have to look to another brand. And right now, the only thing that really offers that, well, is the system I'm using to record my audio right now, which is the Vio Z Canvas. That is a machine with a quad-core processor. It is the jack of all trades that really is a desktop replacement in a tablet form. But if you don't need that sort of processing power and don't care about the lack of dedicated graphics that, say, the Surface Book has to offer, which I don't think is really that appealing, but some people want it and have to have it because it is available. It is an option where traditionally something like that didn't exist in a tablet, which is what makes it unique, even though it is a laptop. Then the Vio is the only option to really give you that sort of performance. Otherwise, you're looking at your best bet, and that's because, as I mentioned, the Surface Pro lineup is mature. This got thinner, believe it or not, so you're with the type cover looking at a little over 2 pounds, which if it does replace your laptop, there's no way that your 12-inch laptop was coming in at that weight or with this form factor profile and overall quality. Screen quality is actually better here, in my opinion, than what I've seen on the Surface Book. Go figure. Yes, less resolution, but same pixel density with the way it breaks down with the 3:2 aspect ratios on the screens and their pixel counts. Both using Microsoft's newly branded Pixel Sense technology for the display. So not sure exactly what happened there, but just happened to look better on the Surface Pro 4. The pen has also been revamped. Rather than what we had with the third generation, we now have a fourth gen pen that has been improved, I would say, substantially. Not only did they change the shape to resemble more of a pencil look and feel, but you also have replaceable tips now for the pen. The eraser is now actually rubberized, so you can erase on the screen without worrying about scratching the display, something they didn't quite think through in the previous gen when they made this usable as an eraser. N-Trig, still the technology being employed here ever since Microsoft bought it. Of course, they're not going to stray. And you now have 1,024 levels of sensitivity rather than the 256 found in the previous generation, which is a very big jump. Anyone who thinks that that isn't, well, is fooling themselves. And because you have a kickstand here that can go to any angle, artists are going to love this machine. Now, I did not mention the starting price of the Surface Pro 4, so let's get at that. $899, a new higher price point than at least previous generation where we had an i3 at $799. Now they're starting it at $899, and that is for the replacement to the i3, which is an M3. A very low watt chip. I really do not recommend that system for anyone. The only advantage that it has going for it is that it's virtually silent, but so are the Surface Pro 4 and Surface Book for the most part, unless they're put under intensive pressure, computationally speaking. Otherwise, you really don't have any reason to gravitate towards a $900 Surface Pro 4 with a CPU that pretty much cripples it out of the gate. Even if you're just looking to ink things with the pen, you're going to give up far too much performance with the M3 version. Granted, the M3, again, fanless, so it has that silence, which is really a nice thing to have in tow. But beyond that, it's slightly lighter, and by slightly, I don't even like to say that because it's really a wash. So I recommend at the very least going with the $1,000 Core i5 version, which certainly is expensive once you throw in a type cover. Remember, the third gen type covers are backwards compatible, or I should say forwards compatible, with the Surface Pro 4. So you don't have to spend the extra money here. You can get an older type cover, although I do really recommend this one. It is a big step, and if you are going to be doing your daily work on this machine or on any of the Surface Pro 4s, it pays to have the best keyboard experience, and if the difference ends up being $20 or $30, I don't see that as being enough of a difference to justify torturing yourself. And it's not a torture to go to the third gen type cover, it's just not worth the difference. So I have to reemphasize that. Speaker output on this, like every other generation, is great outside of the popping noise that I've been struggling with. But again, that's uniform across all Surface products. And I'm not going to do an inking demo here. If you are an artist, really you should be getting the Vaio Z Canvas. It tracks better than any of the Surface products, and that's because it has a quad-core processor. And as I mentioned earlier, no M3 for anyone, frankly, because it just is not, in my opinion, worth the money. The Surface Pro 4 line, the Surface Pro line in general, has always had a premium on it. It's kind of silly to pick up, even though they have bumped up the internal storage to 128 gigs from the paltry 64 that lived in the Surface lineup until this generation. It's finally been done away with. It doesn't really have anything else to offer. Yes, 4 gigs of RAM, like the i5 $1,000 counterpart, but it doesn't have the power of that i5 processor, even though it is still ultra-low voltage. There's a very big difference. Also, the integrated graphics. There is a difference. It's the 515 versus the 520. It may sound like a small step up, but trust me, all of those elements, if you care about using this pen, are critical. Not for writing or for your average input application, but if you're an artist, you will regret not spending the money, at least on the i5 with 4 gigs of RAM. And then if you actually do plan on running AutoCAD, step up to the 8 gig model. Do yourself a favor. If applicable, 10% EDU discount. I think that the model I have here is the right blend of balance, or I should say it is the balance of power and cost effectiveness within the line. That again is the i5 with 256 gigs of solid state storage, 8 gigs of RAM for $12.99, because it is, in my opinion, the most versatile of all of the machines without stepping up into the customization arena, which can set you back over $3,000, just like it can with the Surface Book, which is completely insane. You could buy a real computer for that price, not a tablet. And some will say that of the Vaio, but at least the Vaio has a processor to back up its incredibly high price tag. You simply don't get that with the Surface Pro 4 or Surface Book, and that's where it's clear that Microsoft is taking a jab at Apple. After all, Apple is the king of consumers that don't really know what's inside their computers. I mean, they'd be better off if it just said Intel inside. And I'm not trying to be condescending. It's a matter of Apple's marketing. After all, they want to control the experience, and that is an approach that is warranted for a select few. And that's why Apple still sells so few computers. But as I mentioned, Microsoft is after that few because that is a premium group. It is a group that spends more on average per dollar than anyone else for what they're actually getting, whether we're talking about iPhones, iPads, the watch, whatever it may be. They are willing to pay a premium, and that's exactly what Microsoft wanted to establish with the Surface Pro 4 line. Surface Pro line is what I meant to say, and they've pulled it off. But the $900 Core M3, skip it. And in fact, I think the $1,000 model is still a bit of a waste. You may as well go the distance if you've come that far, because 4 gigs of RAM is fine for the majority of users, but 8 gigs is what you're going to need if you plan on actually having this machine for any extended period of time and ever do any real work beyond light browsing, email, calendar type work and taking notes. Keep in mind, a single press of this button will bring up OneNote. If you hold it down, it'll bring up Cortana, and if you double click, it'll take a screenshot. I already mentioned that you can go with a type cover with an integrated fingerprint scanner, but it doesn't really pay considering that you have the Hello Windows function that will just recognize your face and retina. So why bother with the fingerprint scanner? But if your office requires it, then, well, that's a good reason right there. Otherwise, the Surface Pro 4 does exactly what I expected it to do, which is just improve upon the Pro 3. I wish we would have gotten some more battery life, but it's one of those things where Microsoft is trying to make sure that they keep their margins in line, and this product does definitely reflect that. And that's why the improvements were incremental at best. But those incremental improvements are heartily welcomed on a machine like this, because the Surface Pro has been a work in progress, really, in my opinion, up until today. And of course, you can still make the argument that it's still a work in progress because we still have bugs. I don't have the driver crashes that I'm experiencing with the Surface Book, but I do still have the popping, as I mentioned. So still symptomatic of some sort of driver issue or hardware issue that, if it doesn't get rectified, leaves a lot of users with defective hardware. The good thing is Microsoft does now have a physical footprint in terms of their retail locations where they can stand behind their product and actually take care of consumers in a way that they previously could not. And I say that because, well, I remember when I first reviewed the Surface Pro, there was no Microsoft store near me, and now I can think of maybe a half a dozen locations. So that says a lot. Granted, I do live in the New York area, and that changes things, New York City to be exact. But either way, the physical presence is something that has to be there in order to make a machine like this successful. Now, beyond the type cover, other accessories, and by the way, I do think at this point in the products lineup, every year that I've reviewed the Surface Pro, I've said I think that people are a little bit wild, that they think the keyboard shouldn't be priced separately. And that's because, quite frankly, when you look at the competition, they also nickel and dime on every accessory. So I thought Microsoft is within their means to do so as well. Not that I want to spend more money, but if they're the only one making a product that I want to buy, they're going to get my money in order to complete this fit and finish. I mean, look at how slim that is for the entire machine. Again, only a little over 2 pounds. I'm not in love with the felt, never have been in love with it, but it keeps things like light, and I do wish there was a power cover, but I guess that's what the Surface Book is for. It got the power cover. Power cover was never brought back to life. Maybe we'll see that next gen. Who knows? You can see the headphone microphone jack port there, volume and power button right there, which is the top left, even though I have it flipped around right now. It's on the right side. Rear camera, I already mentioned the kickstand exactly as it was on the previous generation. Mini display port out, a USB 3.0 port, and then your charging port. Now keep in mind that really, in my opinion, this is the way to go. I know this isn't a comparison today, but if you said to me, Ed, which one is it going to be, the Surface Pro 4 or the Surface Book, I would say save yourself the money, go with the Surface Pro 4, get the model I have here. If you don't need the processing and RAM power to back up that you have here with the $1,299 model, certainly go with the $1,000 i5 with 4 gigs of RAM. I still think that's going to be enough for 8 out of 10 consumers. But power users are going to want to lean towards this model. Then again, remember, one power profile, just like the Surface Book. So when I say power users, I'm using that as quite a loose term because I still had expectations like I get out of my Vio Z Canvas where I actually can go to a high performance mode and use it like I would a computer rather than something where I recognize the engineering and the design feat that Microsoft pulled off here, and I respect that, so I'm okay with one power profile. So it's really a matter of what you're doing. You know, the color accuracy of the display also improved, so that's another nice thing, something that you could not say about any of the Pro models in the past. I like that they kept the micro SD card slot stashed here. The fact that in the Surface Book we got a full-size card slot really excited me, but then the fact that it couldn't actually conceal the card disappointed me. It was a step backwards in my opinion. Here, Microsoft made it really clear that expandable storage was on their resume, and then they kind of wiped it off in the Surface Book, which is particularly odd considering it starts at 128 gigs rather than maybe something higher, as it, in my opinion, should have started at 256. But better than them starting it off at 64. I think we'll all agree to that. Even if it would have been $100 less, what on earth would you have done with that machine? But overall, the Surface Pro 4, between its 6 to 7 hours of battery life, slightly larger display, improved upon processor, which computationally speaking is a legitimate improvement. I think the number was 30%, and from what I've seen so far, it's not really choking on anything. And you do need that extra RAM and push with the processor if you plan on treating this like a real laptop. If you don't, if you plan on treating it like a tablet, go ahead and go with the M3 version. But again, $900 for something that looks like this but performs in a way you don't want just seems like a complete waste of money in my opinion, which is why I can't recommend it, as I said early on in the video. The integrated GPU here, you'll be able to game, but you're going to do it in a crude fashion. I mean, you're going to be running everything at the lowest settings, very low resolutions. You'll do a little bit better with the Surface Book if you buy the integrated NVIDIA GPU model, but at what cost? I mean, you could buy a gaming laptop. So if gaming is what you're after, this is not the right product, nor is the Surface Book the right product for you. You should be looking at a gaming laptop. And in fact, I don't even recommend those because they become antiquated so quickly, and the amount of money spent on them, granted you do get a portable form, is really ridiculous when compared to the desktop scene if gaming is your goal at the end of the day. Or even if you're a mixed user where you need, you want to be able to do video rendering like myself, as well as game, you're still better suited in the desktop world. So again, it's about respecting what the Surface Pro 4 represents, which is really a basic business machine. Can it be used for entertainment, watching movies, playing games? Sure. Just understand what type of games. You're not going to, this is not your next console. And by the way, I'm not paying any sort of compliment to the console world junk. PlayStation 4 and Xbox One can go, hide in a barn together as far as I'm concerned. I own both of them. But the point I want to be very clear is that do not think that the Surface Book is going to take you to another level when it comes to gaming compared to the integrated i5 520 GPU from Intel, because it really isn't. No differently than with the Vio Z Canvas that I have, the Iris chipset in there is only slightly inferior to that of what that 1 gig dedicated NVIDIA solution can offer on the Surface Book for an incredible premium. Again, I believe it starts at $1,900, the model I'm reviewing. So you're taking a huge jump, and yeah, you're getting the keyboard included, but how much did you just pay for that keyboard and integrated GPU if you went for that option? A substantial increase, because remember, this i5 model starts at $256. The i5 for $1499, which again does have a keyboard, unlike this one, starts at $1499 with 128 gigs of storage. If you want to get up to the 256, well, you're in another class of pricing. And at that point, you may as well be thinking about the GPU and other things. So it's really a matter of what you need. Do you need what the Surface Pro line is all about? A computer in the form of a tablet? Or are you looking for a laptop? If that's the case, then you should be looking at the Surface Book or maybe a laptop. Another one, by that is what I mean. Another Ultrabook, because after all, I do find the Surface Pro 4 and the Surface Book line to, in my opinion, cannibalize each other a little bit. Microsoft certainly believes that's not the case, but I think that at least anyone who already is in the Surface Pro lineup ecosystem loves what Microsoft's been doing. If they're stepping up to a Surface Book this year, it's not because they're also picking up the Surface Pro 4. And if it's someone who's got a Surface Pro 1 or Surface Pro 2, clearly I would say move to the Pro 4 unless you really have been waiting for a laptop and are okay with the premium that comes with that brand new first-gen product. Both are really nice, but the Surface Pro 4 definitely the more mature product, and everything about it, I think at least, tells you that right off the bat, from the fact that the type cover has come so far. I just wish they'd come out with a power one, as I keep mentioning. And even the accessory dock, I wish they would have stuck with the actual form-fitting dock from years past, which I enjoy because it does turn the machine into a little workstation. Essentially just drop it on like this. And this, by the way, will work with the third gen one. But the fourth gen is now a modular square plastic box, which pretty much looks like anything else, kind of like the Kensington SD4000, although it is capable of 4K at 60 hertz output. They claim 2 monitors, but in my experience, that has not been the case. So it's something where it's nice that they've made a backwards compatible dock for this. I wish, though, it was still in the form of what we're accustomed to. I think that was a step backwards. I think Microsoft was trying to address consumer frustration, but they did it at the cost of part of what made the Surface line unique looking, and the price is exactly the same. Of course, it will work with all of your Surfaces, which is nice, but at what expense? It's given up the entire cosmetic that made it unique, and that is what the Surface lineup is all about. It's not just about the capability of the product, which is a given out of the gate, but it's also about the aesthetic, and that's what Microsoft has done really well with both the Pro lineup. I mean, look at how far we've come from the 10.8 display on the original model, 10.1 inch, I meant. The 10.8 is the Surface 3, which is not a computer. It's an Atom-based machine, more of a tablet, even though it runs a full OS, and it is the best tablet money can buy as far as tablets go. That's not saying a lot in a world where the Surface Pro has taken over. I mean, yes, it's on NFL sidelines because there's a licensing deal, but also because what else could they put on NFL sidelines that would really be able to work the way this can? And that applies to basically every business application anyone could ever think of. So Microsoft has a piece of gold here, and it's matured. That means that it costs them less to make every single part. They're 4 years deep on assembly and design, and the fact that they really didn't change a lot only benefits them and gives us room for hopefully a even more impressive fifth generation product. I could hint towards things I'd like to see, which is a larger Surface, again, a power cover. I mentioned in my Surface Book update/review that I really wish the Surface Book would have a kickstand on its tablet half, a larger battery in there, and maybe the bottom half, as I mentioned earlier, the keyboard part with battery in tow and graphics option, would be something that we could optionally pick up for this. But then that would have kind of eliminated the entire placement of the Surface Pro, or excuse me, Surface Book altogether, which is, I guess, why Microsoft did not go that route. But I think that was a tactical error that we'll probably see them correct next year. But that's just my own estimation. As a consumer, I definitely would have rather had a larger Surface Pro here in the 4th generation, and not by 0.3 inches. Granted, this is an improvement because it's an improvement across the board, but I think a larger one would have been even more enticing to the majority of consumers, especially if they could have made it a nominal, a small increase in price rather than a strategic jump in order to get us ready for what's going to come next year, where the starting price could be more than $14.99, like with the Surface Book, or $8.99 here with the Surface Pro 4. And I really don't consider that $8.99 to even be the starting point with this product, because as I've mentioned, you really need to step up to the i5 in order to get anywhere, and that's $1,000. And then if you want something that's not going to be hindered by the limitations of its build, you need to step up to what I have here, $12.99, the i5 with 256 and 8 gigs of RAM. And you have to get this right the first time, folks. You cannot upgrade this machine in any form. So you have to make sure that you get exactly what you need. And that's why I've tried to make it clear that if you're just doing really light tasks, the M3 is passable. And that includes light tasks with the pen. But if you actually plan to use this to its capability, you must step up to the i5. And if you plan to go beyond the basic, you have to get the 8 gigs of RAM. Remember, I mentioned at the beginning, I'll reiterate here towards the end, that Microsoft claims the i5 8 gig model here cannot run AutoCAD, but it can. It's the exact same component list as the Surface Book, which for some reason they slipped up on and admitted that the i5 with 8 gigs of RAM, meaning the base model, could handle AutoCAD. So I'm not sure who in the marketing division missed that, but it was a pretty big miss for anyone who could read at least, because that meant that for $12.99 you could get the performance of $14.99 as long as you didn't care about the bigger screen and, of course, physical keyboard and slightly longer battery life. You're looking at, I mentioned 6 to 7 here, just like the Pro 3 model, somewhere between 8 and 10 on the Surface Book. And for those of you wondering whether or not the Pro 3 is a sideways move to this, I would say probably. You're just going to spend some more money to get slightly more processing performance. Yes, they've addressed heating and cooling issues, I really should say, but not in a huge way. I mean, we got a single power profile rather than, I would say, substantive change. So that's an issue unto itself. And it has gotten loud. I mentioned the speaker popping. No driver crashes here for video drivers I'm talking about. Like the Surface Book, again, I want to reiterate that because even though this is a 4th gen product, it still has some issues out of the gate, like the speaker pop, which if you cross-reference that online, it's a scary thing. So I'm hoping that that's a driver issue, not a hardware issue. Otherwise, I have a lot of exchanges to make. But of course, as usual, I'm giving all of you every piece of information that you could possibly need about this product. So again, pick the model you need. I would say be conscious of the pricing, because in a year, of course, these things are going to come down in price a tremendous amount, just like the Pro 3s are on sale now. And I think that if you're trying to choose between the Pro 3 and the Pro 4 and budget is an issue, the Pro 3 is the obvious choice. The Pro 4 is not a game changer. It's simply, as I've mentioned throughout the video, the more mature version. Does that make it better? Not unless you can't do something with the Pro 3 that you can do with the Pro 4. And for the most part, if you have an i7, 8 gigs of RAM in the Pro 3 world, you're going to be able to be just as competent as you are here in the Pro 4 arena. So that should answer that question to anyone who's trying to pick between the two. I would say save your money, get a top-of-the-line Pro 3 if you think you need the i7, even though it gets throttled, because you're not necessarily going to see that much more performance here, even though you will have a new generation Intel processor, same battery life, slightly larger display, new pen. If pen input's important, though, absolutely make the transition. I mean, they even finally came up with a way to store the pen, which might seem ridiculous, but was critical. I mean, how Microsoft didn't get that right from the very beginning still irks me to this day. And this isn't a perfect solution, but oh, is it so much better than double-sided tape with a flap. That's all I have to say. So a lot to like here with the Surface Pro 4. It is a daily driver for me. I may have to still exchange it, as I've mentioned. The Surface Book, I'm not as in love with. I have a feeling the second generation of that product is where Microsoft is really going to shine in their now newly born laptop business. Again, I believe in Microsoft making tablets that can replace laptops. They believe they're going to start making laptops that can replace laptops. So I'm still on board with the Surface Pro 4. That's my own personal preference. The Surface Book, beautifully designed, well-built system. I will be doing a comparison eventually, but I think you already got my position, especially if you've watched my Surface Book update as well. Then you know already I'm partial to the Surface Pro 4 because that's really where it all began. And in my opinion, all lies here today in 2015, almost 2016. Otherwise, a great machine that you really can't go wrong with right now, and there is literally nothing like on the market in terms of ounce for ounce computing power and build quality from a name you know, and for the most part, I would say can trust. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them, and of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.